You're doing really good, and then all of a sudden. So this is Freya. I was thinking we were graduating, but all right, you're doing better now. Me fiddling with the camera wasn't very helpful, was it? Oh, all right, so Freya, when we think about our genetics lesson, you can't see her fleece, but the majority of her body is white. And then she's got the black eye patches. So from that we know, come on, that she's black based. I'm getting dizzy. Come on, princess. She's black based. And she's got spots, so she's spotted. So she's a yearling, and I rued her fleece last year, so I'm excited about what her fleece is going to look like this year. And what else can I tell you about her? She was a twin. She had a brother who was also spotted. He's no longer on the farm. All right, come on. You are nuts. I made 3 slides to show the genetics for each of the ewes. One covers the color genetics, the other is spotting, and the other is pattern. So this slide shows you that Freya, who's out of blue sapphire and rush, she's black. She appears black. Her genotype is uppercase black, and then we're not sure if she's either carrying brown or if she is a solid black based on what we know about her parents. This slide covers her pattern genetics. So remember, there were 5 different possibilities with Shetland sheep, and both of Freya's parents are solids, so she's also homozygous for solid. And she is spotted. Both her parents have the spotting phenotype, and so she is homozygous for spotting as well. Okay, this is Eir, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, E-I-R. This is the year we did Nordic gods or something. Andrew picked the naming convention because apparently there's a game tied to the characters. Let's get that around here. So anyway, she's a gray catmugget, which means she's black based, and then her pattern is catmugget, whereas Freya's pattern was solid or no pattern. Eir's incredibly smart. I do this thing when I take their photos. I put them in sort of like a little pen just outside of the barn. And she was the only one that figured out that she could jump over the one side of the fence because it was a little lower. She's just really smart. You're following me so good. You're just such a smarty. Really, I'm impressed with her. Rued her last year also. I think I rued all my yearlings. And if you're you're following so good, I can't get a good shot of you. I can't remember if I sold her fiber as raw locks or if maybe I washed and carded it. I really don't remember. You're beautiful, aren't you? So I have 5 yearling ewes to train, and I've done 3. So I've got two to go, and they are the solid blacks. Good job. Eir is out of Mrs. Hughes and Rush, and both of them are black. So they're Rush he carries brown because one of his parents was brown, but Mrs. Hughes is homozygous for black. So Eir turned out to be black, but she could be carrying brown. We don't know, and we'll find that out after we breed her a few times. And if she throws brown, then we know she carries brown. Eir appears to be a catnugget. Her phenotype is catnugget. But because her sire, Rush, exhibits no pattern, which is represented by the uppercase A, lowercase a, she is going to have the solid or no pattern allele as her recessive. So she could throw a solid lamb. So this one's interesting. Mrs. Hughes, she's not spotted, but she carries spots, and you can see she's got a little bit of a coloring on her nose. And that's an indication of being a carrier, which would make sense because one of her parents was spotted. Rush is definitely spotted, as you can see. So as a result, Ear came out not spotted, but she also carries spots, and we saw that as a lamb. She had little white flecks on her face, which is an indication of that.
And this is a beautiful Sif. So she's kind of a combo of both of the ewes we just looked at. So she's, come on, spotted and catnugget. So the catnugget is her pattern, and the spots come through. You can see the spot on her foot, but she's wildly spotted all over her body and stuff. And she's got the smerslet with the white little. You ready? Keep walking. So, Sif I washed and flicked and then put her locks on the drum carder. And I was able to sort the wool from light to dark and made, I think I got like 9 carded batch from the wool that was just under the coat. And we coated all the yearlings early on because there was a point in time where we were doing hay, and they are slightly shorter in stature than the other ones, and they were getting hay on their backs, and so we put them in the coats a little bit earlier this summer. And this group had white ear tags, so we're color coding the ear tags to make it easier to keep them organized in our minds. You're doing so good. Such a pretty girl. So all 3 of these girls are going to get bred this year in our theme of trying to get better conformed ewes. These girls are really built nicely. And also the black based to get more black wool, black or gray, which is very, very popular. That equipment is the guys putting in the cable lines because we're going to be getting high-speed internet. So I feel like baking them a batch of cookies.
So like I said in our video, Sif is very spotted. You can sort of see it in the body of her fleece there. And her sire is Rush. He's spotted. The dam is Mrs. Patmore. She's spotted. So Sif is homozygous for spotting. When you look at Sif's pattern, she is catnugget. You can see that with the little flecks in her eyes and also the dark underbelly. Her dam, Mrs. Patmore, was a catnugget, and Rush had no pattern, and so Sif carries no pattern, which means she could throw lambs that are not catnugget, even though she shows up as a catnugget. Okay, so Sif is black-based, and since black is the dominant allele, when we breed Rush, who's black, to Mrs. Patmore, who is brown-based, we got a black ewe, and Sif carries brown. So if we breed her to a brown ram, she'll throw a brown offspring. Or if we breed her to a black ram that carries brown, it's possible that she could, by 25%, she could throw a brown lamb.
Hello everybody. This video is going to be how I wash a fleece, and what I thought I would do before I dug into washing it was just kind of give you an overview of the fleece that I selected to wash. I do get a lot of feedback from viewers that they love to watch me looking over my fleeces, so I was going to give you a little footage of that. This fleece is from a ewe that we don't have on the farm anymore. Her name is Sylvia, and she's with a really wonderful girl who's going to be showing her and taking her to livestock shows and stuff. We moved her off the breeding program and onto the other farm for a pretty specific reason, and I'm going to show you some examples from her fleece. The reason that we decided not to keep her in our breeding program is that she has what we call a boulder crimp, and also ever so slightly inconsistent in terms of uniformity. And our breeding program, we're focusing on very fine crimp and uniform fleeces. And so earlier in an episode I was talking about, how we try to put the sales list together. We're really at the point now that we're really fine-tuning the flock at this point. Everything that Sylvia's fleece is gorgeous, and I'm really going to enjoy working on it. So what I'm going to show you here are a few examples. Let's see if I can do this. What I'm going to show you is an example of Sylvia's fleece. Now, this is considered a bold crimp, if you weren't aware of that. It's not wavy, but you can really see the crimp. It almost has like a Romney appearance. This is a lock from a fleece that has the more finer crimp that we're breeding for. And so hopefully you can see that difference. So the reason why that Sylvia, we decided to move her along, is that different parts of her fleece looked a little different. It's just so crazy subtle, but it was enough that we made the decision that Sylvia wasn't something that we wanted to breed. And we've got to keep our flock numbers down because we don't have a ton of space in the barn. We do lock them up at night, and so from a health standpoint, we've got a limit of right around 50 ewes, which is pretty much where we are right now. So with that said, I'm going to tell you that the reason this fleece didn't make the cut to go to a spinner as a raw fleece is that Sylvia had gone past her rise ever so slightly, and there was a fairly large matted section on the bottom of the fleece that I didn't like and didn't feel comfortable offering as a raw fleece. So my strategy for next year is to try and rue as many sheep as I can so I don't end up with this condition, and then we'll see how that goes. And the benefit again of doing the rueing is you're not going to get the matting on the bottom of the lock, and you're not going to get that cotting at the top of the lock where a little bit of last year's growth is still there, so you can flick it off, but it's included in the weight when you purchase a fleece. And so the rueing commitment I'm making will help eliminate that. All right, so I'm going to grab the camera and I'm going to just take you around the fleece and we'll look at the different parts and stuff. This is the entire fleece. Sylvia is Morit, brown. And we're looking at it from the tail end. Now I skirted this fleece so that it doesn't have any britch. So what we have right here is probably just over the wool that's just over her hind leg. And then this is the back. So right along her backbone, she actually separated after shearing for whatever reason. But along the backbone, the fibers typically are a little shorter and more coiled, tightly coiled. You'll see that quite frequently. Then you've got the two sides of the fleece. And then up here is the neck wool. And you remember I told you before, you can always tell if you've got neck wool on a fleece because of the way the shearer does it, if they do it the way mine does, which is there's like a whole swag of wool. That's your neck wool and it's sturdy. So again, another scenario where I had most likely while I was skirting this, I skirted off the britch and put that in a pool to make into millspun yarn. But I kept the neck wool because I'll hand process that anyway. And so I just left it on the fleece knowing that I wasn't going to be selling it. So a couple things. Like I said, she's just, the consistency isn't up to our standard, where some parts of her fleece have this extremely bold crimp, and then other parts have, it's actually quite bold as well, you know, a finer crimp. So we want something that's going to be the same. That's one of our goals. This is usually where you get the micron sample from, this side part here. So the issue with this, I'll show you that I was talking about. Okay, so I'm turning the fleece over, and now you can see it's like it's just this mat that when you if you were to, you know, process this, that's all gonna come off. It's like a little weak patch and stuff, and I don't like to sell fleeces when they have this kind of a mat. I like the locks to be open from the top all the way to the bottom. So that was why this was deemed not available for sale as a raw fleece. But I'll tell you something I love about it. It's just the dark, rich color. Really dark moret. It's beautiful. So it's long enough. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wash this, card it, flick card it, and then convert it into bats on my drum carder, and sell these in my shop, because I don't have any nice dark brown like this on the shop right now. And these blonde tips, you know, they're gonna, a lot of that's gonna flick off, but some of it will stay and give that beautiful golden bronzy highlight that we all love. Look how tightly curled these back locks are. Sometimes if those are really short, I use those for my little needle felted lambs. And you've got this very bold. We've got construction going on around because we're going to be getting cable quite soon, which means I'm going to have high-speed internet, and that's going to be awesome. This is a really nice fleece. Very clean, because of course she was coated. So now I'm going to take you into the laundry room, and we're going to start washing this fleece. Okay, so I'm here in my laundry room, and there's three things that I use to wash the fleece. Number one is this mesh Sager bag, which has actually been mended a couple times. So when my boys were in high school, they played soccer, and this was what they used to carry the balls around. And it used to have a drawstring, but the cat chewed that, so now the drawstring is missing. But it's okay, because it's really just serves the purpose of keeping the fleece together. And one of the themes as I go through the washing of my fleeces is that I always want to retain the lock structure, and because of the way that I process it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is this rack. This came with my dryer. So I guess if I wanted to dry things in the dryer without having them tumble, I would set this on and it would dry them. So I use this to, when I pull the fleece out of the water, and I set it on here, and I'll show you how I do that in a second here. So that's the second piece of material. Third, I didn't mention it, but I've got my utility sink with the handy sprayer, which is pretty critical. And then I just purchased, I think I unpacked this last week, this power scour, and I read the instructions, and it said to scour a fleece, 1 tablespoon of the scour with 2 gallons of hot tap water, add 1 pound of raw fleece. Now, this fleece is about 2 pounds, a little under. It's pretty heavy for us. So I'm going to follow the instructions. I'm going to use 4 gallons of hot water, which I think I use more of the water than that normally. And then I'm going to measure the tablespoons. So kind of not really, this isn't really how I normally wash a fleece. Normally I just use Tide and I kind of blub it in there, and but doing it that way, I do quite a few washes, where what I'm understanding by using the unicorn scour is that I won't need to do more than one wash. Our wool isn't that greasy, so we'll see how it goes. Okay. So I got my rubber stopper. I'm going to stop the bottom of the sink. And then hot tap water. And then I'm actually going to measure it out. I think I'm just going to go with 1 tablespoon for this first time, because someone cautioned me in my video comments that a little bit goes a long way with this stuff. And my wool's really not that greasy, so I'm going to just put that right in the stream. The water doesn't feel soapy, and it kind of smells like facial cosmetics, clean cleansing material. Okay, so while we're waiting for the tub to fill up, I'm going to put my fleece in the bag. I don't use any method for putting it in the bag, other than I do try to get it so that it will, when it flattens out, kind of mirror the dimensions of the utility tub so that I get the maximum surface area. So it's in the bag now, and I just make sure that these loose ends are towards the top so that I can pull it out easily. Okay. If second wash is needed, use half the amount of power scour. That's what it says here. 1 tablespoon of power scour and 2 gallons of hot tap water. And then it says soak it for 20 minutes, which is, I usually do 15 minutes. So, bring this over here so you can see. I'm going to say it's about 4 gallons of water. I'm going to put a little more water in there just to make sure I get good coverage. That's one last look at it before it gets washed. There's probably some of the bits from, yeah, well, obviously bits around the edge. That matting. Should be fun to work on. Alright. That's about 4 inches right now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, well, first I'm going to move my spout over. And like I said, I don't separate the fleeces out by lock and wash it that way. And, you know, I just do one fleece and wash it all at once. So then, like I said, I do try to make sure that I get the maximum Serpent. This sets. So now what I do is just so very gently use this lock tool. I don't want to lock. And very gently push the wool down into the water. This feels really zen. You can sort of get the feel of the wool being soaked, the water wicking into the wool. There's not enough water in here for this fleece. So I may end up doing another wash. Maybe I'll wash it with a tablespoon again. I'm not real fanatical about getting my fleeces really super duper lanolin free. I like a little residual. So be aware of that if you are interested in ordering bats from me, that they've got a little bit of lanolin still in them. So when you can see the water above the fleece. So, like I said, I don't think I have enough water in here for what I'm accustomed to. And she had a big fleece. Alright, so I'm going to set my timer for 20 minutes. And we'll pull it out and we'll see what we got. I mean, the water is already pretty dirty, so it's already doing its job. A little bit more than 20 minutes have gone by, not much more though. So now I'm gonna take the fleece out of the water and drain it, and that's where this drying rack comes in. I'm gonna set it aside. I'm gonna grab the bag by its edges to pull the fleece out of the water. And because I'm using the bag and not grabbing the wool directly, then I'm not going to be disrupting that lock structure, which is really important to retain. And it's heavy. Be prepared for some heft. Unless, of course, you split the fleece. So there's some dirty water, which I'm going to drain right now. And then I'm going to let this sit and drain for, usually takes about 5 minutes before the water is run out. I don't squish it or wring it or any squeezing or anything. I just let it sit and let the water drain out of it. Just let its natural wicking happen. And I am going to do another wash. And I think I will put more water in, and based on the directions, I'll split the amount of soap in half. I don't want to get this so clean that there's no texture left to it. So that'll be the next step. So in about 5 minutes. Alright, so 5 minutes have gone by, and you can see there's no more dripping. So the fleece is pretty much drained, although if I move it around a little bit, it's gonna maybe lose a little bit more water. So there's dirt at the bottom of the tub. Use my handy sprayer to get that out of there. Okay. I'm going to measure out. First I thought this was like a, oh, maybe it is a squeeze bottle. For heaven's sake. Okay, so that's what you're supposed to do it. don't pre-soak or anything. Pretty much I just go right at it. So I'll fill this tub up, like I said, a bit fuller than it was before, and we'll see what the water looks like when we put the wool in it. Like I said, I used quite a bit more water this time on the second round. So I'm going to remove my drying rack, and then I'm going to set the wool on the top, and it sort of on its own starts to pull apart. I'm just very gently going to help it along there, making sure I still have access to the edge of the bag when it's time for me to pull it out of the tub. Doesn't really need to get smushed down because it's so saturated with the water right now. We'll let that sit for another 20 minutes and then we'll run it through a rinse. It's been 20 minutes and I really do set my timer on my phone, otherwise this process stretches out forever. So by using the timer, I can really wash a fleece within 2 hours and get it out to dry. All right, so this is our second soak, and so then once again I'm going to grab up the bag by the edges. And the water's a little less dirty, but still has dirt in it. Set it on the rack to dry. Another 5 minutes, and then we'll do a rinse cycle. Okay, so that was the second drain, and you can still see a little dirt in the tub there. So now I'm going to do a rinse, because that wasn't a lot of dirt. Looks pretty good. Alright, so I'm not going to put the rinse, there's a fiber rinse sample I got that I'm going to use the next time. I don't want to add too many new variables to this process. So in the past I would use Tide detergent and it would take usually 3 cycles to get the water clean. So with this unicorn scour I'm only supposed to use it twice, which I've already done, so now it'll be the rinse cycle. Same process as before. The big difference here is obviously there's no soap in the water. Nice and easy. What is that doing there? Anyways, alright, organize it later. Still seeing some cloudy dirt coming out. Alright, leave that for 20 minutes. I'm going to go out and take some pictures of the sheep. It's a nice day. Take advantage of the weather. Okay. 20 minutes. Water's still pretty hot. Oops, so trying to escape. should measure my hand and know like how much is that. It's probably 3.5 inches, but I should have that measurement so I know and can do that kind of stuff. So this lock is obviously probably what it would look like fully stretched because there's no bounce right now. Anywho, not a lot of dirt left in the water. I'm going to rinse it one more time in the tub. Then I'm going to rinse it in the washing machine so that I can spin it dry and set it outside to dry. There's still a little sun left out there. I might be able to get a little drying done before the sun goes down. Okay, that's the last rinse. In the wash tub, anyway. Water's fairly clear-ish. So this time now I'm gonna let this sip, and I'm also gonna run hot water in my washing machine at the lowest level. I'll show you how I do that. Alright, so that's draining nicely for me. There's nothing in here. Done that a number of times. Alright, so I'm going to put the setting hot and the level low. And then once that's up enough of a level, I don't normally even have to fill it up that much. I'll dump in the fleece. I'll show you how I do that. Alright, that's enough water for the size of the fleece. I'm going to turn the water off. Happy I did not drop the phone in the water. And then I'm going to put the fiber in there. That's the next step. So I'm going to take the water bag. Just so gently. Actually, I think I'm going to use the bag to dump it in the... I think that's what I do. It's always weird to like talk about what I'm doing because normally I just bang through it and don't really take the time. So I put it in here, but I try to make sure that it's going to be able to go all the way around, surround the agitator. Just again to get more surface area. I'll take a video once it's in here. And then gently push it down. Yep, there's plenty of water in there. So the wool's in the hot water, and I think it looks pretty clean. I think it looks pretty good. So I'm looking forward to processing it just to see if there's any difference in how the wool feels or smells or whatever, having used the power scour rather than Tide laundry soap. So I'm just going to leave it sit here for another 20 minutes, and I'm always afraid when I do this that somebody else in the house is going to come and close the lid or start it up for me, but it hasn't really ever happened. But so I'll let this soak and then I'll be back. So it's been 20 minutes and now I'm just going to spin this. Let it spin it out. Okay, all spun out. So now I'm going to take it out and trundle it out to the back deck where I'm going to set it out to dry. Alright, so here it is. It's still a little damp. Now, here's one thing I'm going to suggest for you. You're going to want to pick it and straighten it and everything. I suggest you just, as much as you can separate easily without breaking up the lock structure, that's all you do. If you start seeing that you're breaking up the locks in order to get it to lay straight, just stop yourself. And I know it's hard. I always say just put your OCD in the corner and leave it there for this piece. when it's dry and you're carding it, then you'll be able to mess around with it. But just gently try and, get it as unclumped up as possible so that you've got more surface area to be available for the drying piece of it. And when I'm drying, I have, see, like right here, I just have to leave that. Otherwise, I'm going to tear it and possibly lose some block structure that I want. Okay, this is an old screen from a screen door, and it's actually, I've wrecked it, bent it a couple of times already in this process, but it still works. So what you want is airflow both on the top and the bottom. And I have this handy lawn chair that works well enough. If it's windy, it's a little bit more tricky. Usually if it's real windy, I'll leave the fleece in the house. But even this late at night, it's like 5 o'clock at the end of September. It was up in the 70s. This will probably be dry in a couple hours. So before I go to bed, before dew starts to fall, I'll bring it in. And then that's it. That's the washed fleece. And the boys are right there. So that'll be ready for carding tomorrow. I still feel some grease, so that's good. I think it's time to eat. So that's how I wash a fleece. Hopefully that helps. Thank you. Rich and I have been selected to be Fine Fleece Shetland Sheep Association judges for the fleece contest that's going on right now. And the way it worked was they sent us all samples from all the entries, and we are judging those samples here tonight. We actually have looked at them already and drawn some conclusions, so these are essentially our results. The first thing I want to do, and I don't, maybe Rich, if you can help with this, I wanted to go through the different characteristics that we're using to grade the samples on, and maybe you can just talk about those and why they're important.
Sure. So we put together a checklist that was based primarily on the fleece judge at, I don't know if it was 2017, 2018. A Shetland Sheep Society judge did the fleece judging, and she had basically a scoring system. So I thought it was pretty decent. So that's what we use for our judging here. So just to go through it quickly, the categories are strength of staple, length of staple, uniformity, crimp, fineness, color, handle, cleanliness, and then you get 10 points for each of those, and then you add up the total, and that's your winner. So that's what we did with the 4 samples that we received for the judging.
Right, and so Rich and I judged separately, and we kind of come at it from 2 ever so slightly different ways. You know, I come at it looking at it from processing the fiber into yarn, and Rich is coming at it more, how would you characterize your angle on looking at them?
Just trying to be as difficult as I could possibly be. You know, back in 2011, I received training from the Shetland Sheep Society judges, and they went through with all the people that were there that went through the training, and they said, here's what you look for, and they went through all the different sheep characteristics, and they spent time on fleece as well. So they're basically saying this is what we would have in the best flocks in England, in the UK, and here's how you would evaluate these. So that's how I came at it. It's like, all right, compared to what I consider to be a gold standard fleece, this is what it was. So we tried to rank each one against what we thought it should be, and I even took it a step further where I used the quote-unquote Oliver Henry grading system. It's basically on a 1 to 5 scale, super fine, fine, good, heavy, rough, and then we put it in one of those, I put it in one of these categories. It wasn't really part of the judging, but I said, well, if we're going to look at it, we may as well grade it how we think he would do it.
Right, why not? And the interesting thing was when we did these separately, and when we came back together, pretty much our grades were within 1 point of each other on all the different criteria, which I thought was interesting. So, the first sample we have is the one that we placed last, right?
We placed this one in 4th, yes.
So we had 4 samples. This was the last one, And I don't know, how do you want to do this? You want to just go through each of the criteria and talk about it? So strength of staple.
First of all, I thought all of them had a good strength of staple, all four submissions. So what we do is we go through and we just hold it up a little bit so you can see it. And then you hold it at the base and then towards the tip anyway, and then I get it with a good tug, good snap. And you're just looking to make sure there's not a break in the fleece, that it's, a strong staple. Now there's a difference between this and, an 18 micron, a 20 micron Shetland fleece. You start yanking on an 18 micron Shetland, it's going to break. It has a propensity to break. This is a very strong staple, but also it's not 20 microns either.
Yeah, so this one did well on the staple. The length of staple, actually, you took a ruler out and measured it, and the standard is 3 to 5 inches, right, Rich? So this was just 5 inches. I mean, if there's any, the sample I measured, so if there's any that are a little bit longer than that, it's not to standard. So we gave that
So how long was this one?
an 8. This was 5 inches and a little bit above. And then the next thing we measured was uniformity. And there's actually 2 samples here that we pulled out of what the entrant gave us to judge. And I'm just going to put these up to the camera closely so you can see. These were both in the same bag, and you can see the one on the left is fairly straight and almost, I would say, hairy. The one on the right is more wavy. That's not uniform, so that's an example of not a sample not being the same.
Yeah, we pretty much agreed on that on most of the things, amazingly. But uniformity is tough to judge. We should probably say that when you're judging a fleece, you need to judge the whole fleece. So you can look at uniformity from front to back, top to bottom, the whole thing. You look at how well it was skirted, how clean it is. Although this is a big sample, it's just a small sample, and it's very hard to tell density, uniformity. So the way we also looked at it for cleanliness, we said, well, this is a sample, a sandwich bag full of staples. That should really be clean, because you could really pick out the dirty stuff. Should be no VM in there. Any kind of debris, hay, shouldn't be anything in there, because it's a small sample. You should have picked that out.
Right.
So we took that into consideration when we graded, since we didn't have the whole fleece, and it's more difficult to judge and grade when I gave it the scores.
It's kind of a strange, what we're dealing with right now these times, but
you deal with what you have.
So this entry took a hit for uniformity, so we gave it a 5 out of the 10 because of that. Crimp, we gave this a very low score for crimp because the entrant. I don't see crimp in that. I see that as fairly straight, right?
Yeah. So for the standard says it needs to be wavy. I thought it was wavy. I always draw a distinction between wavy and crimp, though, even though technically they're the same thing. Wavy to me is bad crimp. It's not organized. It's loose. It's not going to produce a yarn that has any bounce in it. It's going to have no elasticity whatsoever. Not that that's a horrible thing in Shetland fleece.
Right. We're talking about standard.
Shetland fleece is multi-purpose, can be used for many different things. And this, as a Shetland go, I thought was a pretty decent fleece. I didn't think I've seen much worse. Mm-hmm. There were some things we didn't care for about it, but one of the things was the crimp. It's just a very wavy crimp. Technically, this would meet the standard, but you're being generous, I think, if you say it does. But it does. It's wavy. You can't argue against that.
But there's pieces of it, other samples in this sample that this person selected that aren't much at all. Okay, let's move on to fineness. So we gave this fleece a 4 for fineness. It just doesn't feel fine, right? I mean, it's feeling like it's higher than 30.
Yeah, no question about that.
Density on a scale of 1 to 10, we gave it an 8. So density is a really important trait. Rich talked about the ability with the fleece to protect the animal in harsh weather. Another reason I like a dense fleece is because you're feeding the same sheep the same amount of hay, and one's going to give you more wool than the other because it's a denser fleece, so you're getting better output. I think this fleece had really good density, so we scored it fairly high on density. Handle.
The handle's not very good. Some of the other samples we look at had much better handle than this one. So there's a difference between, just because we say it's fine or not fine, that doesn't necessarily translate to handle. Fineness is a function of handle, or handle is a function of fineness, but also the scales on the fiber, whether they feel scaly and rough is a big factor, or whether they feel silky, smooth. That's really what determines your handle, the fineness and the scales on the fibers.
So this got a 4 on handle. And then cleanliness, so this was the one that
And we were clear that's out of 10, right?
It's out of 10.
All right.
Thanks. Yeah. The cleanliness was the thing. So when we were judging cleanliness, we were looking at, is there, like Rich said, is there VM in the sample? And the answer to that is yes.
I'm not sure if that's showing up, but right at the top you can see.
You can see.
And on the back of the piece there's more of it. It's not a filthy, it's pretty clean. It's just not, when you're trying to determine good and better and best, oftentimes that will throw a fleece down a notch just because of that.
And I also took off cleanliness because there were quite a few little second cut bits. And back to Rich's point, we are limited here. We don't have a full fleece, so we have to really get into the nitty gritty. If this, if there were this many second cuts on a full fleece, probably okay. But, you could have really easily gone through this, picked out the VM, pulled off the second cuts, and presented a nice sample. So it took a hit on cleanliness as well. We gave it a 4 out of 10 because it really isn't dirty. There's no manure tags or anything like that. But
yeah, before we were coating sheep, ours oftentimes were worse than this.
Yeah.
So.
Right. So that's that one. And then we wrote comments on the bottom, which essentially are what we just talked about. So that's our first fleece that we judged.
So on this fleece, using the Oliver Henry / Jamison Smith grading system, I gave it a grade 3, which would be rough. Heavy, excuse me, not rough. Rough is grade 4. So this is a little bit below what we would say would be the good category, and a little bit above what we would call rough. So we call it, or we don't call it, they call it heavy if they were grading it. Granted, they would be doing the whole fleece, but just based on what I saw here, the length was pretty good. Oftentimes when the length is this good, it goes into the good category, because it does lengthwise, it looks similar to good. And the other thing you evaluate is the tip on it. A lot of the extra length is in the tip. So those are coarser guard hairs. I shouldn't say they're coarse because I haven't measured them or anything. So when you see tip like that, that's not horrible, but it's going to throw it into the lower category, the lower grade.
Okay.
Again, that's not part of the judging that we did, but I'm just mentioning it.
All right, the next sample is also a ram. I don't think we mentioned that. The last sample that we looked at was a ram fleece. So this one is in 3rd place, is also a ram. So this is the sample that we got. The wool. Do you want to go through the evaluation that we did?
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time on the 1st or the 4th place fleece. So this is 3rd. This is very similar, we thought. It placed better, clearly was better than the last one, but it had some of the same issues. So, you look at the strength of the staple, again, it was equally as good as the last one we just looked at. The length was right at the maximum, but it was inconsistent because some were 5 inches and some were 6. It was right on the fence there. But overall, the character was quite good. Let's see. I'll show you some differences here. So you can see it's still a wavy crimp, but it is crimp.
Looks like a crinkle cut French fry.
It does. But then compare, this one looks a little bit different than the one I just showed you.
So it's straighter at the base.
Mm-hmm. So it's still pretty good crimp. More wavy than I like, but my preferences didn't really, I tried to keep them out of this. We don't breed for this type of, I guess I'll call it boulder crimp, but it's a wavy crimp. Uniformity, I showed you some differences in the staple length, and even the crimp varied a little bit, just even on this little sample. We have no idea where the sample came from, presumably mid-side, I'm hoping, but without knowing that for sure, just making an assumption that it was taken from the correct place. It certainly wasn't taken from the bridge, we can tell you that. Fineness, it was a little bit finer, I thought, than the 4th place fleece. The handle was better, a little more silky, not quite as rough feeling.
Definitely. Big difference.
Cleanliness was similar, maybe a little cleaner.
A little cleaner, but still had bits of second cuts and patches of albium.
So I put in, again, the Oliver Henry scheme, I gave this a grade 2, which would be good. I think if you're a fine fleece Shetland breeder, you should be in the good or better. I also say if you're a fine fleece Shetland breeder, I wouldn't breed with this ram, or the last one that we just looked at. That doesn't mean you can't breed with it,
Right.
but you're trying to breed for finer fleeces, and this guy's not going to get you there.
Right. The one comment I made on the thing is if you did have to breed with him, maybe find your ewes that have the shorter staple length that are really fine to get more length maybe, if you were backed against the corner and had to use this ram.
But, I probably should couch that a little differently because, we have bred with rams like this before, but as we continue to try and improve, we aren't getting lambs like this anymore. But it's not a bad fleece, and you bred this one to a nice fine ram, a fine ewe like Jen said, then you certainly could get good results out of that, because there's nothing wrong with this fleece, really. Just with going against the gold standard, you gotta be pretty harsh.
Right. So that was the 3rd place. Then the 2nd place fleece. Oops. It's this one here. Sample number 4.
Yep. So this was her 2nd place fleece, as Jen said. I thought this was a big step up from the 3rd and 4th place fleeces. So let's just look at the staple first of all. You can see it's got pretty nice crimp. I'm very satisfied with this crimp. I think it is a little bit wavy, but still it's a good crimp. Length was very good. What did you have for length? 4.5 inches.
4.5 inches. Yep. Yep.
It's another staple. Pretty consistent, I thought, also, even though it's a small sample, looking at different random pieces, they all look pretty similar in length. Not identical, but similar. You do have some of this, second cuts, which knocked it down for cleanliness. Other thing you can see is this does have a little bit of bounce, right? It springs, it's elastic. The other samples that we showed you, the 3rd and 4th place, did not have that.
Yeah, this one got a better handle rating.
It is. It's a pretty silky feeling fleece.
And this is also a ram fleece. That's good.
Now this one I would use as a ram. This would be a good breeding ram. Again, this might be the kind of fleece that you're breeding for, and as a fine fleece breeder, this is perfectly acceptable. Nothing wrong with this one at all. So I think I already said I put this in the good category as grading wise. Oliver's not going to sue us for this because we're using his system. We use it at home, and in the fine fleece group, we use a similar system, but we don't usually publicly, talk about it. So I don't know. But anyway.
All right, so that's the 2nd place, and now the 1st place fleece was actually in the other category. So we didn't have a ton of entries here, but technically the 2nd place fleece overall actually won the ram class. And this class was other, but because we had so few samples, we just graded them all together. And I'm quite certain this was a U. Clip number 3, adult U, and the individual that entered this has this U rated as PG2. So.
Yeah. So whoever had rated as PG2 was wrong. No, PG2 is a Fine Fleece Association grading system. So we used the micron results, and we give it it's a premium grade or a regular grade, and that's 1, 2, etc. 1 being the highest grade, which would be super fine. 2 would be fine, but that's based on micron results.
This is what I'm used to seeing. I like this one.
Yeah, this is almost like lace-like. It's like a web, spider's web or whatever. So here's another one. You can see very organized, small, tiny crimp, very fine fleece.
Nice and bouncy.
Very elastic, but also pretty strong too. I was a little worried that it might break, but it is a PG2, so it's above 25 microns.
Really?
It is. Well, according to the grading system,
Yep.
that would be PG2 would be not only over 25 microns, it would be a little more variation. So, but I thought it's a great fleece. I thought, at least the sample that we had.
Mm-hmm. So I did mark it down on density. So this fleece actually didn't do as well as the other ones from a density standpoint. And when the fine fleeces that I like to have, I like them to be very close, the lock structure to be very tight, again, because you're going to get more wool off of the U, where this one, it was kind of difficult to organize, and it just didn't have the density that the other ones had. So that was the only area where it didn't excel versus the other 3 entrants. And it was very nice and clean, very minimal second cuts. So congratulations to whoever submitted this entry. And how would Oliver Henry have graded this one?
You know, we sent a bunch of samples to Oliver, and we talked about that on a previous video. So I know generally what he would say about the fineness, and he would say this is super fine. Yeah. Because we sent him stuff like this, and he said better than super fine. Finer than what they had over there is the comment that he made a lot of times. So that's how I graded it. Even though it says PG2, I didn't know that when I graded it, because I didn't read anything. I just basically just graded it the way it was. But afterwards we saw on the card that it said PG2, which would technically not be super fine. But for all intents and purposes, I thought it was, super fine.
And it's a 3-year-old U too, just.
Yeah, that's a good point. You get up
good.
to 3 and 4 years old, sometimes you lose a lot of the fineness.
So I would want to spin this one. All right, so there you go. And congratulations, as we said. Thank you everybody for entering fleeces. It would have been fun to have a few more to look at in different colors and stuff, but this is the first year, and things being the way they are, I'm really happy that we got to judge the ones that we did.